So, like, there's this book that I wanted to write for many, many, many years now. I think the first concepts of it started when I was in elementary school. Like, I've had this idea for a very long time, and I'm not even sure if it's a very good idea. But it's something that I've wanted to do, and I don't have the patience really is what it comes down to, is I can't, write it. And I'm not very descriptive either, so like writing down the details is hard for me. But I've started writing it so many times. It's really sad. But I started painting, and I ended up making a species from the book. I guess it's a species. Yeah, it's a species. And so I thought I'd talk about it. And like, and that's another thing, is I can't figure out exactly all the specifics. Like, I can't decide what I want to do with it. Cause like, the way that it goes is it's I guess a parallel universe. Like, that part I don't really care about, but it's connected to our world via interdimensional portals or what have you, however the main character decides to get through at any given point. But it's a world, it's a fantasy, sci-fi, magical girl type book. It would, if I was to ever get it through, it would end up being a series. There's no way I could fit all of it into one book. It'd be one hella long book. But it starts off with the girl who is obviously modeled after me, because the concepts started when I was in elementary school. So obviously, it's supposed to be me. And she's human, and she somehow stumbles onto an interdimensional whatever it is portal. And so she goes through, and she ends up in this place where there's a word for it, but I'm not thinking of it right now. But they're like cat people, dog people, wolf people. They're people with animal ears and attributes and things, and each one of them has a type, like how they do with Pokemon, where there's electric types and fire types and all of that. And in this world, they hate humans. Like, they die. Humans are not appreciated here. So, and when this happens, she's like 9 or something like that. Like, she's a little girl. And, so she ends up in this world, and she's alone at first. Like, she doesn't meet anyone. And this is where some of the details kind of get mixed up. At some point, she gets essentially possessed by a immortal soul. He was cursed by his family to live forever, and then his family destroyed his body, so he's just a soul that kind of wanders around and possesses people. And he's all pissed off because, he his name is Kuzo, but they call him the Shadow. I think that's what. Yeah, he's the Shadow. And what had happened was he was the son, this is gonna get long, but he was the son of a, like he was part of a really high profile family. He's like 15 at the time when this happened. And his friend, who is a lower level person, like he's a really high powerful person, and then a slightly lower level person from the same like tribe thing, she gets pregnant, and because they're friends, everyone's like, well, obviously it's yours, and you shamed the family, so we're going to kill you and stuff. Like it's literally like, so you supposedly got this girl pregnant, so we're going to curse you for forever. And so he's just like, fuck my life, it wasn't me, and you know, this shit happened, this sucks. He's gay. So it's like, it wasn't him. And then later on in the story, you find out that the girl's father is actually the one who got her pregnant. So because of this, there's a bunch of ancient magic, something or other. I hadn't gotten through the details of that yet. But they mixed up, and like the laws of something or another are like, well, that's kind of fucked up. He didn't do anything. It's not his fault. And so everyone involved was cursed. To live forever. Like, everyone got put under his curse. And only a few people actually understand what happened. So it's like the girl's father, Kuzo, his mom, his siblings, and some other people that were involved all got cursed. And so then they destroyed his body, so that he's just a floating spirit. And he goes around possessing people and just causes havoc throughout everywhere. He was 15 when this happened, and at the time of the beginning of my story, he's like 600 years old. And then like, so he is wandering around, he finds the human girl. And so he possesses her, I think out of curiosity, because he's just like, whoa, random human girl, where the fuck did this come from? And then she gets picked up by this guy, and like, he's not supposed to know that she's human. This is one part where I kind of just don't pay attention to. I have to figure it out if this was ever to go anywhere. But like, she is changed into, like, in the book, some humans can change into the cat, dog, whatever people. I should really figure out a name for them. But they can change them, and then they're shunned by their families. Like, oh my god, you suck. What's wrong with you? And then if they get found out to be human by the people, then they're killed. So it's kind of sucky all around. But somehow she goes through the change. And then she gets picked up by this guy who likes to experiment with people. And so he's really high powerful. Really high powerful. He's a really high power guy. And so he's got a lot of money. He just kind of runs experiments on people. It's torture, essentially. So she goes through that. And it really fucks her over, kind of. But like, because she's got Kuzo in her head, like, she's able to dissociate from it. Like, she basically just kind of shuts down, and then Kuzo goes through it. And he's 600 years old. He's been through everything. He doesn't even have a body at this point. So he's just like, I don't give a shit. So he basically goes through it for her. So she's still kind of there. So she does experience a lot of it. But she's essentially just tortured for however long. And then stuff happens and she escapes. And then probably something to do with the fact that the reason Kuzo was so high power in his little tribe thing is because his family is full of priests, like really high magic people. Like they have a shit ton of things that they know and things that they can do magically. And so I guess some of his magic rubs off on her or something like that. So she ends up turning into what I call a coda. Which they're basically just priestesses. The Koden, there's a male and female version. And the girls are considered higher power, but it's still like a patriarchal society, so there's a lot of little, like, the women are higher power, but they're still less than men kind of thing. They're just things, basically. And so, like, she ends up changing, and then she comes across this kid, and she accidentally does something, and he becomes her guardian, which is like a super, his job is to guard her, but he's magically bound to her. Like he can't leave her. His sole job in anything is to protect her at all costs. And it turns out he is the youngest prince of the Kurchan nation. I put a lot of thought into this. Like, there's a, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing actually. But he's the youngest son, and his mom kind of dipped. Like, she got pissed off at the king and left. And she was a high power coda also. She was actually what they call a high coden, which is super powerful, amazingly, like, important person in their society. And she got pissed off at the king, and so her youngest sons were twins, so she took one of them and just kind of left with him. And being twins, in my book, twins are they're bound together with magic because they're in the womb together and all of that. And so, like, they have a really strong mental bond. She broke it with her sons, and so she broke Damien. His name is Damien. Damien's mind, and so, like, he kind of just went insane. Basically, he's like 10 or something. He just fucking crazy. And so, like, he gets bound to the girl. And basically, when Koda takes on a guardian, there's usually like a deal. Like, if I will protect you, but you're going to do this for me. And basically, their deal was that she'd help him find his brother. Even though this is a complete accident. Like, they're little kids. They have no idea what they're doing. Like, she didn't even know she could do this. And they're, like, bound mentally. Like, they can hear each other's thoughts and stuff. And basically, I think what I had decided was the reason that it happened so easily was because she had no idea what she was doing. Like, she needed someone to protect her, and it happened. And he had, how am I going to explain this? There's, when you're mentally connected to someone, there's a physical imaginary link. And so, like, it's a string. And later on in the book, or in the story, I should call it a story. Later on in the story, the main character is able to, like, make the threads appear. She can, like, cut them and separate people from people. I think I saw that in an anime once. 20s. That was weird. But what happens is she ends up connecting to the broken thread of Damien and his twin. And so their link is never really completely secure in the first place. So they have kind of a really weird relationship at all. And it actually isn't apparent at all until like way later when they're like in their 20s. And so she gets bound to him, and then they go and they just kind of get to know each other. Basically, they do little things all around. Because she's Coda now, her trainer, the one who teaches her how to be magical, because you don't just learn that shit, is Kuzo in her head. And so she goes around and she, like, there's werewolves and vampires, and she's constantly getting into trouble, and because she's a klutz and shit. So Damien hates her. He does not like her at all, but like he can't make it obvious because, you know, they can hear each other's thoughts. So he hates her. And like she does know it, but you know, it's kind of one of those unspoken hush hush things. And so like she's constantly getting into trouble, and she makes friends with everybody. Like and then later on, it turns out that all of her friends are really good connections. And she makes friends of people who are natural enemies, like vampires and werewolves and lots of other people. And Kuzo actually has a cult following because he's 600 years old and has caused lots of havoc. And so, oh, that's another point. Is she accidentally... Kuzo is in her head and he's controlling her. He's constantly fighting with her to take control of her body. Because he very quickly finds out that she's actually really, really, really magically powerful, even though she's like this big. I think she's a really little girl. And in the story, I really need a name for them. I think I was originally calling them demons because I was into Inuyasha for a long time when I was little. So the demons are big people, and she's based off of me, and I'm little, and so like it's very obvious that she's not from the region. Like they're big people, they're dark, black hair, brown eyes, like, you know, they're in the Kurchan, which is where she spends a lot of her time. Like they're a warrior race, so they're constantly beating the fuck out of each other. They're really aggressive, so it's like if you're in their region, you better be able to fucking defend yourself, or you're gonna die. So he's constantly fighting with her to get a hold of her body so that he can go and, you know, break shit because he's all pissed off at life. And that's a big thing that she's constantly doing is fighting with him and then getting into trouble and getting into fights. And she finds shit like dragons and baby animals that are wounded, and like she raises kids that, because in the story, people will take infants that they don't want, just kind of throw them in the woods. And so she'll find babies and raise them. And then they call her Mai. Just like adopted mom. And so she raises babies and makes all these friends with everybody. And eventually she gets really strong because Kuzo is training her when he's not fighting her. It's easier to use the magic if in her body if her body is already used to using it. And so, she gets really strong, and eventually she makes him a new body and puts his soul in it, and she binds the body to her conscience. So anything that she wouldn't do, he is physically unable to do. So, like, he's not allowed to rape and pillage and murder anymore because she's based off of me, so she's a goody two shoes. So he's basically bound to her will, which is like a really big thing because he's a 600-year-old super powerful magic priest guy. So it's a testament to how strong she got. I think by this time she was about 12 or something. And so she keeps getting stronger, and eventually she takes up the mantle of the High Coda of Kerchan, and then she's adopted by the king, and so then her and Damien become adopted siblings. He still hates her. And so they're off doing things, and she's getting into trouble, and her job as the High Coda is to protect her people and make things easier for them and stuff. And so she goes around and she heals them. And stuff. She just goes around and does whatever she can to help people. And so she becomes a really big, like, people love her. And then some people hate her because they're like, oh, well, why didn't she come to our town when we had that huge plague? And it's like, she's one person. She can only be in one place at a time. And so this is where all of her allies come in, is because she can, travel through different countries and things, and because she does a lot of traveling in her years, and so she can go to different countries and she can find an ally everywhere, and so she just goes around and helps people. And then stuff happens, and they find Damien's brother, and then he breaks off the thing because, deal is off. And in the book, or in the story, that's actually not something that people do. Like, yeah, you did agree to do this to help me to do something, but it's kind of a social faux pas to break off the arrangement because, the strings, it's the same thing with the twins. Like, you break off the threads that hold people together, and then they go insane. So Damien breaks it off, and she goes into what's called a heart sickness. And she just kind of leaves, and everyone just kind of thinks that she died. Because, the Coda who goes through heart sickness doesn't generally live. And if they do, then they're not able to use their magic. They're pretty much human at that point. And so she goes and she gets, wow, there's a lot that I can't talk about. She has, let's see, in the book, there are gems. They're basically just, they're little circle crystals of some kind, and they have a lot of power in them. No, I put my arm. And when you have one, it goes inside of you, like you use magic and you put it in your lung or your heart or something, and it does different things depending on where you put it. And when someone who has one dies and they have like a black heart, like they, have been wronged and shit, the gem turns black. Like, it'll turn whatever color is predominant with your emotional state. Like, if you're really passionate, it'll turn red. Things like that. And so, like, she collects black ones. And the soul of the person who had the crystal is trapped in them. They're essentially ghosts trapped in there. And so she goes and she collects them and she purifies them and lets the ghosts out. So she's got a little baggie of them. And it's like she can summon them and use their powers. Like she's got a bunch of werewolves and she can summon them and they'll use her energy, but they'll attack other enemies and stuff. But some of them she can't use because they're too volatile. Like she's got some really powerful ones, and she just can't control them. They're so angry. But she still intends to fix it someday. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, and so she has a deal with all of the souls, and she has a little bag of them, and she has a deal with them. Like she will purify their souls, basically, and the crystal will go white, and the soul is released. And, you know, they go to the afterlife, whatever that is. And then like, so this guy steals her bag of rocks. That's what he called it. And you know, he blackmails her because she has a deal with these, so she can't just like leave them. But she's heartsick, so she can't do anything about it. She's essentially she's really severely depressed, and so like she's dying slowly. Like she can't eat, she doesn't sleep, but her loyalty to the spirits in her bag is kind of basically the only thing keeping her alive at that point. And then this guy, oh, that's another thing that I forgot to talk about. Shit, this is a long video. So this guy called, I called him Riku. He's actually the son of, Acheron, which is the guy who tortured her when she was little. And she's actually known as, Paloma to all of the people that he tortures. Because she spent a lot of time freeing people. Like she would go around and just kind of find his little things and just like set up ways to free them. And she's bound to him also. He has magic on all of his little slave things. And like, it's generally on a wrist. But it's a magic. And then if you obey, you're fine. If you disobey, then the magic spreads and it's really excruciatingly painful. And there's actually a little subculture of the people who escape, is because you get a permanent brand. Like it'll start with a little band right here, and then it just spreads and designs and goes all the way up. And the bigger your brand is, like you have more social status because it means you disobeyed that much. But it also means that, because when it gets bigger, he exerts more there's more force exerted on you. So it's, you know, this is a little bit painful, this is a lot painful, this is a lot painful. And so, the main character's brand goes like all the way up to her arm up here. But she meets this guy, Riku, who is actually the son of Acheron. That's his name. I don't remember why I named him that. And he is also branded, but not a lot of people know that. And he's the one way that people know who Acheron, all of the broken people that Acheron would torture, they all know that Riku's his son because he's got really bright blue eyes. And that's, they call him demon eyes. And so, like, he's one of them because he does resist and he does, like, he is branded, but they don't trust him at all because he's the son. So it's like he went through the same thing, but he's not accepted. But and there's actually a whole language too. There's a magic language that they speak. You just, if you're one of them, you just kind of know it, so you can talk to others. It's not something that you can learn, like you know it or you don't. And so, like, they can tell each other because, you know, they're able to talk to each other. If you know the language, then you're one of us, kind of thing. And so, like, he knows who she is when he sees her in the camp of the guy that's blackmailing her. And so he knows who she is, and he's like, well, you're not afraid of me. And she's just like, I don't care about anything. And so he gets the crystals back from the guy, and they run away, and he essentially nurses her back to health just because he's like, fuck it, why not? And so they go on their little, he essentially becomes her guardian in place of Damien, but she's got like super severe trust issues now. And so it's really hard for her to come to terms with that. And yeah, so they go on little things and they do things. And he doesn't know that she's Takoda. That is her formal title is Takoda Jesue. It sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. But he hates her title. Like, he doesn't know that she's the Haikoda, but he hates the Haikoda because of political stuff that I haven't bothered figuring out yet. And so he talks about it a lot, and he thinks that she is a herbalist. She goes around and collects magical herbs for the Coda. That's what she tells him, because it is dangerous for her to be in public alone. And so, you know, he thinks she's just an herbalist, and he knows that she lived in the palace. He doesn't know who she is. So he talks a lot of shit about her to her face, and he doesn't realize it. And so she's like, well, I can't be myself in front of this person that saved me because he hates me. And so, like, and she does little things that tip him off. Like, he's not a stupid person. And so he's just like, he knows that she's lying about something, but he can't quite figure out what it is. Because he knows that she's not a peasant because every once in a while she'll say or do things that are like, how do you know that? Or how do you know how to do that? How do you know how to react that way? And so, like, a lot of the story is him trying to figure out who she is. And she's like, late teens, early 20s right now. And at that point, there's a lot that goes on that I haven't actually said. But yeah, that's my story, and there's lots of magical things. Like, that's another thing, is Riku is, he had, mind thread link thingy to, they're horses essentially, but they're, sentient, and they're usually sacred, and they have this little jewel. The jewel on their head it's identical to the jewels that people would put in the body. It just is on their head. They're born with it. Um, and so they're sentient and they're magical and stuff. And so he had a link with one of those, and that's pretty common. People bind themselves to them. And then someone stole his horse, and threatened to kill him, and then he can't find it. So his life mission is to find his horse again. He's all broken and stuff because his horse is missing. And so yeah, that's his thing. And the main character has one too, but he's not missing. There's also these sacred deer things. They're like white donkey horse deers that are really sacred too. And the main character raised one, and so he's different from all the other ones because he wasn't raised in their society. They're sentient also, and so he's all wild and carefree and stuff, and they're all super serious, and they go around and they read, I guess, like reading the wind. Like they'll kind of just listen to the magic in the air and find a place to go where they can be useful. And there's also the Great Mother Tree, who no one has seen for a very long time because something happened and no one can find her seed. And she supplies all the magic in the world and no one knows where she is anymore. And that's a big ass fucking tree, so it's like, how the fuck do you lose a tree? And so that's another one of the main characters' like missions, is to find out what happened to the tree. Because, when all of society relies on magic and the source of magic is gone, that's kind of a big deal. So it's like her official mission is to figure out what happened to the tree. Yeah. So her name is Jan, is J-E, and then there's a formal honorific at the end, is U-N, so Jan. Like, in Japanese, you can obviously tell I was a Japanese manga nerd for a while. But they often use honorifics at the end of names to show respect and whatever. And so most people call her Jan. Anything else? Really. But Kuzo, like she essentially becomes Kuzo's favorite person ever because she gave him a body, and like he hadn't had one for 600 years, and sharing a body with someone when you're like stealing it is not fun. So he loves her to death. Like she's his favorite person ever. So he goes to the end of the earth to do things for her. And she when she goes heartsick, she disappears from everyone. Like no one knows where she is. Like everyone thinks that she died, even Kuzo, and he's like freaking out, and he goes depressed too because he's like, she was my favorite person ever since ever, because he was 15 when he was cursed. He hates his family, and that's another thing is because he spends so much time in the last 600 years switching from body to body, because when he would leave a body, it's usually because the body died. Like, he went through them pretty quickly because people would shoot them with arrows and they would die. So his soul would live, but the other guy didn't. So he went through bodies pretty quickly. And I don't know where I was going with that. I forgot. Where was I going with that? I don't remember. Anyway, he loves her because he's all distraught and depressed. And, well, I guess that's basically it. But yeah, there's lots of magical creatures and dragons and people dying. There's actually a lot of rape in the story too. Like it's not a children's book. Even though it does seem like it would be, it's not. It's one of those like, Mommy, what does that mean? You're just like, no, you don't need to know about anything. Anything else to talk about? I don't think so. Yeah. This is what I've been drawing in the series, in the book, in the story. They're like trees. They're they're animated plants is what they are. But they just magical walking plants. And this is one of them. I was originally going to draw a tree, but then I ended up drawing this instead. Yeah, I guess that's it. My 45-minute video. Oh god.